and Derry time. So my name is Bertie Horgan. I'm the Vice Chair of Derry Trades Council, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here tonight to the first of the town hall meetings that the ICTU is holding, the NIC ICTU, the Northern Ireland Committee of the ICTU, is holding across Northern Ireland over the next couple of months. We have a big panel of speakers here, as you can see, but they've promised me that they'll all keep to under 10 minutes, and I'll figure out some way of quoting them if they go beyond that. So because we want to, it's described as a town hall meeting, and the idea of a town hall meeting is that you, the local workers, the local trade unionists, or not, if you're not a worker, if you're unemployed, whatever, that you can actually get a chance to have your voice heard. So I'll be asking all of the speakers to come up and speak from the podium here so they can be caught on camera. And we have a roving mic that when it comes to asking questions and answers, I'll be able to hand that out to you so that you don't have to come up. So I'm going to start by inviting the new General Secretary of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions across the whole of the island, Owen Reedy, to say a few words about the campaign.
Thanks very much, and thank you, Goretti, and thanks to Derry Trades Council for facilitating us, and thank you all for coming out tonight on a miserable, wet, windy night, but I think it's really good. I'm particularly happy that we're starting in Derry, because I think you know all about struggle, and you know all about the challenges that are facing your community, where we've seen quite a lot of neglect in the Northwest in recent decades. This campaign, I think, is timely. We launched at the Stormont about a couple of weeks ago. I think it was right to launch at the Stormont because many of the decisions that we need to see happen are only going to happen if we force our politicians to do it. And it's going to require people power. It's going to require workers mobilized and organized in their workplaces and in their communities to get the politicians to do what we need done. I think we can't leave our future to chance. We have to make choices. And Stormont was the right place to launch the campaign, but where the campaign needs to build and grow is in the communities. And tonight is the first of 15 town hall meetings. We have Belfast and Craigavon before Christmas, so we hope to have another 12 locations across Northern Ireland. I think each and every one of you probably felt post-pandemic that there was an opportunity for a different society and a different economy, one where work paid, because we know for too many of our own members, let alone too many workers that aren't yet organized, for too many of them work doesn't pay. And let's remember, during the pandemic, we had a level of social solidarity for a period of time, but it evaporated very quickly. Many of our workers, our frontline workers in the public service, health, social care, education, and many other areas, applauded and clapped. We all know that, we've heard that mentioned before, speculated on their own work about how they need to be properly resourced, how they need to be properly paid. And then there was the list of essential workers. That list is a much longer list after the pandemic than anyone thought before the pandemic, because it included many other private sector workers in food, retail, and a whole range of other areas. And I think for all of them, they had a right to expect, to anticipate, and to demand a better future, particularly post-pandemic after a decade of austerity, a decade of cuts, a decade of pay languishing, and struggling on 1% in the public service if you were lucky for some of the years, and in the private sector, depending on the sector you were in. So add to that the cost of living crisis, where we now have inflation at 10%, and where we have probably the most reprehensible Tory government in the last 30 or 40 years, using society as a laboratory to try certain things out. And we know now that the Tories are saying there's going to be more cuts based on their mismanagement of the economy over the last 12 years. And there's going to be tax rises. And let me come back to the tax rises, because tax rises are necessary. But it's important that the right people pay the taxes, not that it's thrown at everybody as if something's been just thrown against the wall to see how it will stick. Our approach to the cost of living crisis is there are two ways we think it can be addressed. The first one is strong collective bargaining in the workplace at enterprise level and at sectoral level. That has to be combined with the state promoting what we call the social wage. And what is that? That is the state investing in our public services adequately, so those public services are accessible to people who need them. Better resourcing for childcare, housing, education and health. How are we going to get that when the Tories are saying we're going to have to make cuts and, as they call it, adjustments? We're not going to address the cost of living crisis by pay alone. It's not going to be addressed by the social wage alone. It needs to be a combination of both. And there are four fundamental demands in our campaign. The first one is that we should see appropriate targeted resources immediately over the winter months for workers and families when it comes to the cost of living crisis, so that people on middle and fixed income earnings are not struggling when it comes to protecting themselves and their loved ones over the winter. Talk about £100 or even £400 is just not, frankly, enough, and we need to get that moving, and there needs to be imaginative and creative thinking. We need to see the same urgency that we saw with the furlough scheme with the cost of living crisis. The second thing we need is a return to devolution. Now, of course, devolution won't fix everything, we know that. But there are commitments in New Decade, New Approach that all the parties signed up to on workers' rights. We need to see a Minister for the Economy that we haven't seen before, who will actually put workers' rights centre stage. It's not something that is a nice thing to do when the economy is going well, but gives and honours the commitments in New Decade, New Approach on workers' rights, promotes collective bargaining and the right to collective bargaining and makes it easier, and has an employment bill that will transpose the best elements of this very exciting European directive that's going to apply in the South, that is going to bring collective bargaining coverage up to 80%. Won't apply here because we've been dragged out of Europe against our will. That bill can be enacted in Northern Ireland because an employment economy minister has employment rights as a devolved matter, and we want the new economy minister, whoever he or she is, from whatever party they're from, to honour those commitments. But they're only going to do that if we hold them to that. The third issue is, along with promoting workers' rights, we need to see action on the social wage. And people will say, well, okay, that's grand, where's the money going to come from? The money is going to come from one fundamental area, and I'm conscious I have about 3 minutes left, so I'll be brief. When we published a paper called No Going Back Towards a Safe and Secure Future for All, that's on our website about 2 years ago during the pandemic, we proposed a range of activities that need to happen across our economy. But crucially, we outlined how they should be funded. And what we found was that workers in Northern Ireland and Britain pay about 67% of the taxes that workers pay in Europe. People on low and fixed income earnings pay adequate taxes, but it's not progressive enough. Those on six-figure sums don't pay enough tax. And we saw the Tories trying to give those people a break, but they U-turned. So there's scope there for people on six-figure sums to pay more. But the real inequity and the real scandal is when you look at what business pays. Employers, when it comes to national insurance on taxes on labour, pay 41% when it comes to tax, compared to employers in other wealthy European countries. If we bridge that gap, it's 121 billion extra to the Exchequer, and in the Northern Ireland context, it's 3.8 billion pounds extra to a Minister for Finance. Won't solve all our problems, but will go some way. Last thing to say in concluding remarks, positive change won't come by just us talking about it. We need to mobilise for it, and I think workers in Northern Ireland are leading by example. By the wave of strikes we've already seen, I don't think there's a public servant in Northern Ireland who probably isn't going to be balloted for industrial action over the next number of weeks and months, and it's necessary. We'd rather do it another way, but we have to do it this way because we're not being listened to. So finally, what we want to do is 5 things. We want to support all the workers and all the unions that are taking industrial action with this campaign over the next number of weeks and months, because they deserve a just and fair pay increase. We want to have 15 town hall meetings across Northern Ireland because we want to hear what you have to say, and we want to engage with communities and other leaders in the community to try and build the campaign and build a coalition of progressives who want to see radical change. We will hold rallies and protests, but we're not just going to do it willy-nilly. We'll do it at strategic points and strategic locations to maximise turnout. And we do want to meet with the political leaders to say, what are you going to do when Stormont comes back on the cost of living, and show us what you're going to do on workers' rights, because that's a critical way to fix this. We also want to talk to politicians in Westminster. There doesn't need to be an election here, there needs to be an election there. We need a new government over there, that's for sure. And they need to take, not just Britain, but they need to take Northern Ireland seriously and try and help us collectively get out of the political problem that we're in. We want to talk to Treasury for what it's worth while it's under Tory rule, Northern Ireland Affairs Select Committee, and any other politician in Westminster who is interested in this place. We think by those 5 or 6 activities together in a coherent way, we can make some progress. But we're only going to make that progress if workers can win in the workplace we can mobilise people, and we can have more and more engagements like tonight. And I'm really interested to hear what you have to say after we all speak. Thank you very much for coming. Please log on to the website. Please support the campaign. There will be other things we will want you to do on behalf of the campaign over the next number of weeks and months, particularly with the politicians, and we'd urge you to do that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Owen, and we'll be delighted to hear that that was only 8 minutes, so that's showed a bit of leadership there. So our next speaker is Dr. Lisa Wilson from the Nevin Economic Research Institute. Are you going to speak over there, Lisa?
Yeah, I will, because I can click my slides. Am I okay? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Can I move over there? Here, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Owen bought me 2 minutes. So I'm going to talk to you about the cost of living crisis and take you through some data about not just in terms of the cost of living crisis as we've been knowing it for the last year or 2 years, but really the data that I'm going to show you relates to how workers in Northern Ireland have been living through a crisis of a generation. So for the past 20 years, earnings in Northern Ireland have been just getting, have not been able to meet in many years the cost of living, and workers as a result of that have been have seen their living standards stagnate or regress or degress over a period of time. So I'm going to speak to you a little bit about the cost of living crisis inflation as it is now, and then I'm going to take you through a series of data, as it relates to earnings, so what has been happening to earnings over the past number of years since the pandemic, but then over the past 20 years, so trying to get at that picture of a generation. This campaign, Workers Demand Better, is because workers are frankly fed up of it. Year upon year upon year of being dumped upon in terms of their living standards, not being able to make ends meet. The other key aspect of people's living standards, where their resources come from, is from the benefit system, and I'm going to talk to you some of the changes in that. And then, as Owen talked about, is about things to do with our social wage, so the provision of childcare, provision of housing, the provision of healthcare, those types of things. So these three kind of aspects, I suppose, is the evidence base for workers to be able to, to go to government and say, look, when you can look at across all the various different aspects where we get our resources from, we've been taking a hit, and for that reason, workers demand better. So sort of as an evidence base, I hope some of this thing can be useful. So the current crisis, as we've been referring to, is the cost of living crisis. Very suddenly, the cost of energy went through the roof, and it's something obviously that very few households or businesses can live without. Inflation had been building for some months coming out of the pandemic, as obviously as supply and given the speed at which economic activity was returning, but then obviously the Ukraine crisis bolted in behind that and has led to a difficult circumstance in terms of inflation. So energy costs obviously since March have completely changed the game. The rate of inflation which people actually experience, though, in terms of household level, varies based on your individual circumstances. So whilst we hear on the radio each month when the inflation figures come out, they're X%, that's the overall average figure. But obviously the impact which that rate of inflation is going to have will depend on what your income is. So the smaller your income, the bigger bite it's going to take, and the higher income, the smaller the bite it is going to take whenever you're going out to buy things in the shops or whatever. And it matters how much you spend and it matters what you buy, basically. So people who spend greater proportion of their money on energy or on food, those things which have seen drastic spikes in terms of inflation, are going to be finding it much more difficult than those people whose proportion of their income they spend less on those things. So averages can conceal the complexities which those lower income households and lower paid workers are facing in terms of how inflation is affecting them. So as I said, the income which most people have to meet their cost of living derives from the income which they get from their work, from what they work. And I suppose the reason why I wanted to put up this chart, because very often when you go and ask anybody, even asking an economist, ask a member of the public, how much do people earn, people don't actually know how much people earn. So average weekly pay in Northern Ireland this year, so we just had the recent trawl of data come out last week, is at £500. So £497 is what the middle person and the middle earner in Northern Ireland earns in a week. about 25 grand over the year, 13 grand on an hour, £13.39 on an hourly basis. That obviously varies whether or not you're in full-time or part-time work, whether or not you're a male or a female, goes up and down. Female part-time workers obtaining the least amount of income from the work that they do. Male and full-time employment obtaining the most amount of income from work. So then when we look at how does actually earnings actually spread, so from the lowest paid to the highest paid, so if you take the bottom 10% of our workers and go to the top 10% of our workers, how do they compare against each other? The bottom 10% of workers earn about £9.51 per hour, the top 10% of workers earn about £27 per hour, so a gap of about 3 times. So the top 10% earn about 3 times more than those at the bottom. So, but at the middle there, you're as I said, you're having earnings of £13 or whatever, £13.39 in the middle of the distribution. But in this year, we have seen one of the sharpest decline in real earnings. So what real earnings means is that, so you'll have your pay packet come into your, you know, you'll get paid your pay packet, but what would £1 that you earn this year equate to if you earned the same last year? So how much is the cost of living increasing at the same time? So we adjust it to take into account that the price levels have changed. And what we've seen over the years, overall, we've had about a 6% increase in what we call nominal earnings, the money that people get into their pay packets on a gross level on a weekly basis has increased by about 6%. But because we've had a sharp rise in the cost of living, actually in real terms, what you actually can go out and buy in the shop, what you can consume, what level of living standards you can obtain, what resources that you have available to you, has reduced by about 4%. This then again varies based on whether or not you're a male or a female or a full-time or part-time worker, because your rate of increase has also differed. So females have seen the highest increase in their earnings over the year, and those in full-time work, and it's sort of a picture actually as we go through it, those in full-time work seeing the lowest nominal increases in their work, so that the sharpest decrease in real terms. This year's data compares to data the year previous in which there was people on furlough. So this means that we were comparing a furlough year to a non-furlough year, to a furlough year. So the rate, so that 6% increase across all workers is actually not probably as representative of what the reality is, because some people are coming back off furlough into full-time work. So it's a bit of a statistical artifact. And really what in fact that means is that the actual pay squeeze actually underway is likely to be sharper. But we can't really see that in data, and we won't be able to see that for another year until we get another round of data, basically. But when we look back over the past few years, so from 22 back to 2019, 2021 was a good year for pay. 22 was a bad year for pay. But then looking at past the last 10 years, the last 20 years, in 5 of the last 10 years, workers' earnings have not been able to keep a pace with the cost of living increases. So what this chart shows you is it just looks at the change in what you actually get in your pay packets every week, the gross amount you have in your pay packets, and then the navy bar looks at, okay, when we adjust this for the cost of living, how has people's earnings been changing? And in 5 of the past 10 years, workers' earnings have not been able to keep a pace with the cost of living. When we break that then down into the public sector and private sector, so first in the public sector employees working full-time have seen no progression in their earnings over the past 20 years. And that's what this chart shows you. So if you look at the green line, which is the full-time, when you chart that across the past 20 years, public sector workers working full-time, their median earnings have seen no real pay progression in the past 20 years. It's an indictment of our society when we're not having any progression in the living standards of our public sector workers for 20 years. When we look then at the private sector earnings have never recovered from the financial crisis. So we've seen in this chart what it does is look at the same thing as what I've done for the public sector, and looks at what was the year-on-year change in real terms, in terms of the money that you can, what you can consume with the money that you earn. What does it buy you in real terms for all private sector workers, those working full-time and those working part-time? And what we see is full-time full-time and part-time workers pre the financial crisis, they were actually getting pretty good wage increases pre the 2008 financial crisis. Since that, it's never recovered. So we've seen that lift up again. They're doing quite well, 14, 15, 16 periods, but again, that sharp drop off. And when you actually think about what that work looks like for a person living or working in those environments, you almost like get a little bit this year and it's taken away from you next year, get a little bit the next year. So it's very difficult then, and in terms of then how actually people consume, getting ahead of themselves, getting behind themselves, you know, being able to do things with their life, and you're never really catching up with yourself if there's no continuous progression. But when there's stunted regression the entire time throughout a generation, it's very, very difficult to see, to argue as to why, you know, a campaign such as Workers Demand Better shouldn't exist. Obviously, the other component then of our income, a key component of our income, and often not talked about enough component of our income, derives from the social security system. And about 40% of workers receive universal credit. So obviously we had the benefit freeze, which went from 2016 up to 2020. We've got continuation of some of those welfare cuts. But the key thing that I want to talk about in this respect in terms of the benefits is at the minute coming up into the budget announcements by Jeremy Hunt in the coming weeks is whether or not he will uprate the benefits in line with inflation. So he still has not made that commitment to do it. Even if he does uprate it in line with inflation, it will uprate it in line with inflation last September. So that's missing all of this winter into April next year. So it's missing in a period when there's high levels of inflation. Those 9 months is really important to operate it in, you know, in the timeliest fashion as possible. So what in effect they're doing is locking in a permanent real terms decline in benefit cut. If they do operate it, it's still not clear if they will operate it. And the final point, and Owen has talked about this, so I'll not talk about it in details, but as our living standard, as I said, is not just determined by our earnings or our benefits, but also the provision of services within our society, and the resources that we have. So in many ways, we're patching up issues that could be handled by the provision of services, the provision of childcare, the provision of housing, via our labour market and social security system, but as Owen says, putting pressure on wages, putting pressure on our benefit system, which we could patch it up through the provision of services, and I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. That was, I think, very sobering for all of us, although I think most of us know that that's been happening anyway. But it probably explains why so many of us who are in this room have been balloting for action and will be taking action, industrial action, over the coming weeks. So I'm going to hand you over now to Niall McCarroll, who's the chair of Derry Trades Union Council, and he's going to say his few words. But you've got to come up here now.
Thanks, Freddie. I just begin by thanking the staff here at the Hollywell Trust who have been more than helpful with setting up tonight's meeting, and without them this wouldn't happen. And I also want to pass on congratulations to Owen Reedy on his recent appointment to the position of General Secretary of the Irish Council of Trade Unions. And I've been reading recently that and hearing on the radio that Owen has strong Derry and Donegal roots. And I just hope there's a bit of thrown in there somewhere, as having Donegal and Derry heritage alone, having Donegal and Derry heritage alone would not be enough to concern the establishment. You're going to need a good Tyrone connection to really make them sweat. But seriously, on behalf of the Derry Trades Union Council, Owen, we wish you all the best. And if you ever need anything from us, you just have to ask. So, skipping forward, and at some stage in this campaign, we'll reach a point at which we will analyse and review where we currently are, and if we are on the right track, and are we improving the lives of working people and working class communities. With rising social injustice and inequality, there are so many things that need corrected, with one of the biggest questions being, how do we once and for all turn things around? With this campaign, will this campaign be the one that truly brings the establishment to its knees and returns some sense of normality and equality to our lives? Now, some people will say that's not a big talk, and that we've heard all this before, and they would be right. We have heard it before, and I've heard it before, but we must find the answers to our people's problems through this campaign, through a no-nonsense, radical, fighting trade union organising strategy. Poverty has cast a long shadow over the lives of too many people for far too long. The days of robust emails and frank discussions during meetings with unwilling and anti-trade union bosses are over. The battle against the cost of living and the rampant economic inequality will only be won on the picket line and with community campaigning. Trade unions and rank and file trade union members have the power to bring this to an end. People may still say, we can't do anything, it's impossible, nothing can be done. But we have seen locally what can be achieved when trade unions and community campaigners came together for the common good to resist and rebel against attacks on local services. Together we saved the Foylehaven Day Centre from closure, and I remember being at a so-called consultation process meeting organised by the Western Trust and being asked, along with others, to choose between William Street and Rectory Field residential homes. Which one should be closed? Both homes remain open. We also witnessed locally foil port workers and local council workers being successful and having their demands met. These council workers, of course, being joined by their colleagues and school support staff in a huge show of solidarity. We have not always succeeded, though, and if you ask my opinion on why we have not, it's basically because the fight was not big enough. We did not have enough to cause enough disruption. Not enough people or civic bodies became involved. Lessons learned for this campaign. When Eason's bookstore closed in the Foylside and another 6 locations across the region with the loss of 144 jobs, people were rightly dismayed, and no more so than the workers themselves and their families. But this real sense of injustice really kicked in with the announcement that Eason's shareholders were set to receive a 20 million payout in the autumn of the same year. If this campaign is to be seen as a success, we must address the culture of putting shareholders, profits and bonuses ahead of workers' rights and equality for all. Wealth which is created by workers must be shared equally with the workers. The very same issue is at the heart of the ongoing RMT and CWU disputes, where workers are being denied above inflation pay rises at the very same time as profits and bonuses payments soar. Let me give you a few examples just to combine this point. Network Rail Boss, a total annual package of 593,000, 18 times above the average workers' pay. Royal Mail Boss, 753,000, 23 times above the average workers' wage. The boss at BT, 3.5 million, 86 times more than what you and me get. Such obscene salaries. Capitalism is working perfectly. They want us exhausted and worried and penniless. It makes us easy for them to hold the advantage. If we are too busy worrying about paying bills, we simply don't have the time to battle this unfair system. Of course, we don't need to be travelling too far to witness such issues as crisis in low pay and huge salary inequalities. The head of the Public Health Agency here received a total annual package of 300,000, which is even higher than their counterpart in London. 300,000 at the same time when NHS workers are being denied a basic pay rise. There are more millionaires and more people being forced into food banks than at any other time in our history. How is this happening? Enough is enough. Within our political system at Stormont, serious combined action, rebellion must be taken against how our public money is being spent. This campaign must have at its centre a critical analysis of how our public money is actually being spent and whose bank accounts our money is being lodged into. On the back of receiving public money, we have private nursing home owners living lavish lifestyles, whilst their workers had to be protected from hardships and destitution during COVID-19 through additional public money having to be provided to cover their sick pay when off with COVID or isolating. The Trades Council recently completed a local workers survey, which 67% of respondents saying they had no contractual sick pay protection, meaning that in the event they were off sick or they had to care for a sick child or had to care for a parent or grandparent, who needed help at any particular time, these workers did not receive their normal pay. A scandal if there ever was one. Sick pay protections must be a priority in this campaign. We also seen the board of Regina Colley Project in Belfast refusing the appeals of residents, staff and the wider public not to close this invaluable service for women at risk. Self-righteous arrogance at its best. These people don't seem to care about public opinion, but have no issue when receiving public money. This campaign needs to remove the power these people currently possess, and from others like them, fat cat bosses and people who see the allocation of public money as nothing more than a cash cow. We need powerful legislation to be able to take these people on and turn the balance of power in favour of ordinary people. Legislation which includes social clauses and protections built in against corporate greed. And politicians need to do more. My eyes and brain are sick and tired of seeing politicians photographed with certain organisations, charities and other employers, when behind the scenes these same employers are not valuing or respecting their workers. It's about time politicians, when they're visiting these workplaces, they ask to see a typical contract of employment for workers. We need immediate action through radical economic alternatives, including public ownership of our NHS, housing, education and energy companies. We also have a moral duty to look out for our young people. The current minimum and living wage brackets must be corrected, and that is part of this campaign. They are currently stacked in favour of the business class. If you're under 18, all your boss has to pay you by law is $4.81 an hour. It's time the profits created by these workers are shared equally. If you can't afford to pay a living wage, you can't afford to be in business. Asking people to work below poverty wages so you can own a business and have a lavish lifestyle should be a criminal offence. These same greedy bosses are never off their airways or column pages in the papers, providing interviews and their expert knowledge on the economy and what's needed, being the bugles for a rigged system which favours only them. Big business, with the help of the media, currently dictate government policy. We need to be the ones setting the agenda. I recently heard one of these business leaders connected to the Great and Good local business chamber saying, we need to return confidence to the business community. What about building confidence in our young people through respecting them at work and paying them a living wage? Through this campaign, we must build hope and strength for our young people. The time has come to remind all tentacles of the establishment who and what we are about. Workers should be prepared to go through a brick wall for the trade union and indeed the Irish Council of Trade Unions. At a time when the establishment is attempting to criminalise dissent against poverty and inequality, we need to find our voice and regain collective power. This campaign must be the catalyst to solve our problems. We begin organising through these town hall meetings, then we take it to the streets and the picket lines. Solidarity to all those workers currently on street action, and to those workers currently being balloted for industrial action, vote yes for us all. Thank you.
And for those of you who arrived late, assuming that it was going to be Derry time, just to say that this is a town hall meeting, so the speakers have all been brilliant so far, keeping to under 10 minutes. And if that continues, we'll have more than an hour to hear what all of you have to say. So, hang on, just another 20 minutes or so, and we'll be done. But next, I'm going to hand you over to Jerry Murphy, who's the Northern Secretary of the Irish National Teachers Organisation.
Thank you, Grady. All the speakers have been brilliant so far. Let me begin by saying my colleagues have done a great job of describing the enormity of the crisis that we're all facing, and it is us all. I represent teachers, 7,000 odd teachers in the Irish National Teachers Organisation. I'm also chair of the Northern Ireland Teachers Council, which is the recognised body for 5 teachers' unions. So there are a total of 19,000 teachers in full-time employment and about another 4,000 employed in temporary and substitute work. I represent them. I'm not going to describe the crisis for teachers. I'll just give you a flavour of what's going on for teachers here. I have in my hand pay slips for one teacher, a senior teacher, over a 17-year period. And that teacher was earning per month in July of 2005, £1,473. And in March of this year was earning £2,356. That's an increase over that 17-year period of £883, a per annum increase for that senior teacher of £51 per annum. Now, we all know, you don't need me to tell you what inflation has risen by over the same period. So, the middle class teachers are suffering the same as everybody else here. We genuinely are all in this together, and we are genuinely demanding better for every worker. Now, my members and teachers across the north have balloted and voted in huge numbers, huge majority, for action short of strike and strike action. We're currently taking action short of strike, but we will take strike action if that is necessary. And it looks like it will be necessary. I should also point out that something unprecedented has happened here in the amongst the teaching workforce. 5 unions acting in complete concert. Balloted together. The action is designed to be enacted together. The response to those who don't take any action is the same, whether they are a member of the NIC ICTU or the INGO or the Ulster Teachers Union or the National Association of Head Teachers or the National Education Union. We've all agreed, all of that, unprecedented. And the UTU, the Ulster Teachers Union, who have never struck or were never prepared to take a strike in their 100-odd years of existence, are now prepared to strike. So that's the depth of feeling in my sector about this. Now, we have an opportunity here, people. Niall alluded to it. Owen alluded to it. We have an opportunity. Acting together, we can affect the political choice, which was largely made in London and in the boardrooms of the multinationals across the globe. But we have an opportunity, acting together, to affect that political choice and change things for the benefit of all of us. We can engineer a different reality if we act together, stay together, and persist. And persistence is going to be the key here. Owen outlined a campaign of 15 town hall meetings, of a series of meetings with political parties and others about going to London, because we need to go to London. We need to influence that treasury, that Tory treasury. None of that's going to happen overnight. None of that's going to be easy. And none of it can be done by Jerry Murphy or Owen Reedy acting, or Patricia McKeown acting, even the three of us together. We need Derry Trades Council, we need Oma Trade Council, we need Armagh, we need everybody, Belfast even. We need them all, right? Now, I want to conclude, unaccustomed as I am with public speaking, okay, I want to conclude just by saying that it's always a pleasure to come to this city. It's a pleasure to come as a visitor, but it's equally a pleasure to come as an activist. And I'm so enthused to see activists of every hue in this room, because that speaks to me, and what it says to me is that we're onto something here. There's no feeling like the feeling when you know you're right. And people, you're right, and we're right. You're right, Patricia's right, we're all right here. They're wrong, okay? A Tory elite, a business elite, a global elite, they're not right. We're right here. And what we're right about is fair pay, an equal distribution of resourcing to communities and people. We deserve it, we demand it, workers demand better. Thank you.
Jerry, and our final speaker tonight, before we open the floor to all of you, is Patricia McKeown, who is the Regional Secretary of Unison for Northern Ireland. Can you come up here, Patricia? Is that okay?
that's taller than I am.
I think it is, she was just.
So I think, if you don't mind, I'll speak from here. Okay. Yeah. How to speak truth to power. Who am I to tell the people of Derry or the people of the Northwest how to do that? You already know the answers, and you know how long a struggle it can be, and you know the courage it takes, and you know how terrible the consequences can be as well. And I don't think it's going to be any different for any of us in this campaign. You've heard the campaign outlined, you've seen some of the real hard facts behind it. You know what the obstacles are. The immediate obstacles, first one, for us will always be the absence of equality and human rights in the way that we should have them. And here at this part of the 21st century, there is no excuse for their absence and the level of poverty and dispossession that exists in this society. And if unions are about anything, and if they're going to succeed in any way, they have to put maximum attention on the people who are the most dispossessed and the most disadvantaged. And that's really an essential core part of this campaign. The obstacles are poor policies that need to change. The absence of a functioning government here, it would make a difference, no matter what arguments are made. It would make some sort of a difference. It would improve lives for the better. And once in a while, it has managed to do the odd thing right, but it hasn't been cohesive, and it hasn't acted together in the best interest of the people. And we have to put manners on it and make it do that. There's the obstacle of the employers who won't pay and who will not do business with the trade union movement and who resist the organisation of workers. That is not all employers, but it's far too many in this society. And there are far, far too many workers in this society who are not unionised. And we have the major responsibility to sort that out. Not anybody else. That's our job. And that's something we've got to constantly commit to and recommit to. There has to be a genuine commitment to time and resources to organise workers, all workers. And then the other big obstacle, the UK government. And it does not matter a damn who is Prime Minister or Foreign Secretary or Home Secretary or Treasurer. Essentially, what's the reason we're in the position that Lisa outlined there? Well, you know, we've always been a society that got the crumbs, and since the peace agreement, it has been a succession of crumbs from Westminster, not the just settlement that there should have been to improve the standards for everybody in this society we live in. That has not happened. And in more recent times, not even the crumbs. So government pay review body covering the NHS across the whole of the UK says we recommend you pay the health workers X. We don't like the X, but they pay it. They pay it in England, and they pay it in Wales, and they're paying it in Scotland. They're probably going to pay a lot more than that, but they don't give us any money to pay it here. So not only do we get a bad offer, we do not get the money to pay workers who were on the receiving end of all that applause for so long. And we've always said, 1 minute you're an angel, the next minute you're a devil. The minute you start to assert your rights, and in particular your right to be a trade unionist demanding justice, you become a devil. So we have a government across the water that holds the purse strings, and that's, you know, if you're going to talk truth to power, really, the people who hold the purse strings are the people who are responsible for the condition we find ourselves in this society, and you know, we have to do something about that. As far as they're concerned, the working class is the enemy. Trade unionists are the enemy. It has been their philosophy from the beginning of the NHS that they destroy it, and it has been their philosophy from the beginning that they destroy the welfare state. And we have seen that in action so many times over the decades. In this campaign, we need some quick wins. We need people to feel a sense that we can achieve. But there's also long haul stuff. And when I say to you, it was like 1990 when they came to privatise the caterers and the cleaners in Altnagelvin Hospital on the instructions of the Thatcher government. We rallied, we mobilised, we fought, we lost temporarily. But it took 14 years to return all those privatised workers across the health service in Northern Ireland back into the health service. And today, none of those jobs are privatised. But the system itself is being sold off in a way that I have never witnessed before. We're now living in a place where you can die while you wait, and more people here wait than anywhere else. So the death toll is growing, and that's not the shroud waving of a trade union that organises in the health service or whatever. That's the reality of the situation. But why is that happening? I mean, who permitted doctors to go off and build their own hospitals and control supply and demand of the health of the rest of us, and tell us that we could jump a queue if we found the money to pay for it, while they're on the payroll of the state as well? Why is it? And we have our biggest block of membership in my union are nurses. Why is it that some nurses can go off and work for an agency at the same time as work inside the health service and get paid 10 times more per hour for working for that agency? And that agency can be in receipt of hundreds of millions of pounds when there are nearly 8,000 jobs vacant in our system. 8,000 jobs that would be filled if people got a decent rate of pay and decent terms and conditions. How is it that we have allowed our health service to get into the state it's in? And I think that it's now absolutely on a cliff edge. I think there is no doubt that if we the people don't do something about that, we have lost it forever. So we're balloting for industrial action, and advert, bit of pride. Delighted there's so many Unison members here tonight. But we're balloting for industrial action, and is anybody here in the health service who's got that ballot through the door and hasn't actually filled in yes for strike action and posted it back? Will you do it immediately? And yes, postal ballots. Very smart idea of Margaret Thatcher. Who the hell uses a post these days? But we are forced to get our members' opinions on whether or not they will withdraw their labour by using a privatised mail service that doesn't even collect the post every day and doesn't even deliver the post every day. So talk about obstacles in the way of trade unions, but these are things that we could overcome, right? But our ballots out there, it closes on the 18th. I am hoping that we're going to get a yes. There was a great deal of courage and sacrifice back in 1919 and 1920 when our members took action across the health service last time out. Coincidentally, we didn't have a government. It was missing for 3 years again. I'm not saying that strike made the government come back again, but it certainly was a catalyst, and it certainly it mobilised the opinion, the public opinion, against people who ought to be taking their place in government and trying to do something to confront the situation with us. And that might happen again. I think we have to do the best we can to make that happen again. But, those obstacles are big. And they're big against the background of this planet of ours where government after government is lurching to the right. The stuff my dad found himself in a war about, fighting fascists. And I'm a baby boomer, and I was supposed to go through the whole of my life without having to see that rise in fascism again. But, as we predicted back in the 2008-2009 ICTU conference with the global financial crisis, and some people were very optimistic and thought, oh great, this is the end of capitalism. I don't think, you know, it's smarter than that, isn't it? But we did say that when things like a global financial crisis hit, then what you do see is the rise in discrimination and hatred and prejudice and people fighting against each other, and we've seen all of that. And now we're in a place where we're all in a room together in a campaign that will only work if workers and their unions and their families and their communities and their allies all get into this together. And really, that's what we're about, folks. And it's over to you to say to us what else you think we need to do, and to say to us what you're prepared to do. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Patricia, and thanks to all the speakers, both for what they said and for keeping so well to time, so we have over an hour to hear from you. Trade unionists or not, I'm actually really aware of the fact that we're in a city where many people don't have work that allows them to be part of a trade union. And I think it's important to point out that at the moment the government is trying to divide workers from those who are unemployed or ill or disabled and dependent on benefits. But you know, the best thing that you can do to improve the benefit levels of your friends and families who are dependent on benefits is to get a decent pay rise for yourself. Because the government is saying very clearly, why would they give people who are living on benefits an inflation-proof, you know, inflation-proof rise in benefits? And they're saying, since workers aren't getting, you know, up to inflation level wage rises, that therefore people on benefits shouldn't be getting them. Even though, I mean, anybody who thinks you can live on £77 a week, which is what somebody gets on job seekers allowance, a single person gets on job seekers allowance. And actually, just to say that the Workers Demand Better campaign and the TUC We Demand Better campaign both look for, you know, real rises in benefits, because in the end, you know, we're all 1 or 2 pay packets away from having to live on benefits. So it's important that we keep that in mind as well. Okay, I just wanted to say that because I'm aware that there were people, when we were telling them about this meeting, were saying workers demand better. What about people who can't work either because they can't get a job or because they're too ill or disabled to be able to work? So we have a mic, and I think somebody is going to bring the mic about.
Yeah.
Yep. So Gareth, can you turn it on? And who's going to get started?
Yes.
And actually, Niall's just reminded me to say that Gareth, who's the Derry Trades Council Secretary, will note any action points. So you come up with suggestions, you know, there will be somebody taking a note of them.
Thanks very much for all that sharing. I have a question for the panel. I think John Lurgan and James Conley were about today. How do you think he would fit in? Would he be fit in okay with the Irish Council of Trade Unions?
Be a different Irish Council of Trade Unions if he's still around, wouldn't
Okay. I'm going to actually take a few contributions, because if we keep on coming back to the panel on every question, we'll be here until 10 o'clock when we can't.
Hi folks, my name's Sean Harkin. I'm a People for Profit counsellor, and I want to welcome all the panellists here tonight, especially those that have travelled. And it's great to see so many people in the room, and it's great to see so many people who are fighters in this room and who've been out on strike and who've been battled for strikes. And I want to apologise, there was a few of us walked in late and we missed some of the speeches, so I'm disappointed that happened. But the reason why we were late is because we were down leafleting Seagate workers who are campaigning right now to stop redundancies, to get a decent pay rise and to join Unite the Union. And you know what happened down there? They threw us off the property. They came out, treated us like children, threw us off the property. And this is the problem, right? This is the problem. There's far too much respect to big employers like that. And as Patricia said, we have to start putting manners in people. And that's going to be the key thing. People do not respect us right now. And that the only way we're going to get respect is through this campaign that we're talking about. I do want to say, I'll speak as a councillor first. We did agree as a council to endorse this campaign, which I'm proud of. I think we should be asking every single council across the north, across this island, to back the Workers Demand Better campaign. I think that this is the most important fight that we're in right now. But that I want to speak as a trade unionist. Look, in my opinion, it's when workers move, when communities move, that's when we see change. And sometimes legislators legislate because we've been demanding it. And we have to start moving right now. If we do not move, things are only going to get worse. People often say the employer or the boss is the best organiser. Well, look at what the Tories just did. They just said, we're going to attack trade unions. We're going to attack people on benefits. We're going to attack the vulnerable. We're going to destroy your public services. And we're going to award the super rich with more riches, right? That has to be a call to action for all of us. They back down a wee bit, but the plan is still there. So I think for us now, we have to step in our backs, and we are going to be in, as all our speakers have said, for a big, big fight. And people have already fought here. Foyle port workers went out on strike and won. The council workers went out on strike and won. And there's people like the housing executive workers that are out on strike right now. But I think our attitude has to be, when the nurses ballot, as the RCN have done and as Unison is going to do, when they're out on the picket line, we're all out on the picket line. When the lecturers go out on the picket line, we are all out on the picket line. When the housing executive workers that are out right now, we're all out. If the teachers go out, we're all out along with them. If the education assistants strike, we're all with them. That we have to be, if we're in this together, that's what this has to look like right now, because what's happening here is, that I am very worried about our services as a council. I'm very worried about the announcement that the Tories are going to make on the 17th about their budget. And I think we have to reject the idea that there isn't a magic money tree, right? Because that's what we're going to be told. How can we give you a pay raise? How can we give you, as the RCN are demanding, 5% above inflation? Where's that money going to come from? And then what we're going to be told is you have to be realistic. You have to accept that there isn't money to go around. Well, I read the other day that BP are making £900 a second, right? That's where the money is. And we are going to have to start fighting, all of us, to take on, as Jerry said, the global elite, and then the Tories, and then whatever is happening here with our local operation, as we know it's not doing very much right now. But I think that's what I think we're going to need to see. And I think we have to have that attitude of building that. We have to be united now. We're all going to have to stand together, and we're going to have to build that kind of solidarity.
My name is Cormac. I'm from the Sparrows, and I'm here to speak and to ask for your support for our campaign too, in terms of it's a campaign against the Canadian gold mining company that wants to start a massive gold mine in the Sparrows. And gold mining, some of you may know about it, I know some of you do know a lot about it, but gold mining is, put simply, a toxic industry. It poisons the water, it pollutes the air, it releases heavy metals and sulfuric acid into our rivers, and it proposes to pollute the whole Foyle River system from the Sparrows to the sea. And we discovered back a few years ago that, in fact, our system was working to enable this company to deliver a major project that they was going to make a small number of people very wealthy and poison the air on the rest of us and leave it behind a desert, a polluted desert. So we realized then that when we were abandoned by our politicians, that we had to do something for ourselves. So we're here to support your campaign of Workers Doing Better. And our situation right now is that 44,000 submissions of objection have been launched, and like obviously they're not just from the wee place Greencastle where Jacqueline and I are from. We've had support from the trade union movement, and we thank you for that right across to submit those letters of objection. There's a public inquiry forthcoming. We've been given no date for that. We expect it will be within the next year. Save Our Sparrows is a relatively small organisation that works with 5 other community-based organisations throughout the Sparrows, and we're committed to stopping this project. We need your help to do so, but many of us have been threatened to have death threats delivered to us, and many families have, realising what their children and children of future generations face, have said our lives are all on the line here. So we emphasised to you that this is not a local issue, because the toxic poison from gold mining would travel not only in the water, but also travels in the air, because we've had experience from experts and communities throughout the world that there is no good news stories about gold mining. True, they may create jobs for a short time, a very limited time, and make a small number of people wealthy, but they damage the health of the workers, including the workers who work on the mine, and they create a future that is disastrous. So we acknowledge your support in the past, and your support has been helpful in terms of getting motions through the various councils, and as I say, we acknowledge that. But I'm here tonight to ask you, what could the Northern Ireland Committee of the Irish Congress of Trade Unions do, or how could you assist, or how do you plan to assist the community, because it's bigger than us, to overcome this planning proposal by Dalradian, and to help the community stop this project going forward? Thank you.
Let's take Paddy from Unite, and then we'll maybe have people come back briefly before we go back to the floor.
Thanks very much, Greta. We were one of the councils that went out at the start for industrial action, Derry and Staban District Council. And people was telling us from different unions, you're never going to win. This is correct too. We should not be fighting unions. We should be in solidarity going out. We find we were quite lucky in Derry and Staban. We only have 2 unions, which unite and upset. We done our fight behind closed doors, and we sorted it out with the local reps. And it was compromise give there. But our members, we had 1.75 for the last 12 years, and we decided at this campaign that we would go out and look for increments. What an increment is, I move up the pay scale by 1 increment. 1 increment was given me 2.5%. We're lucky at how our council was made up, because in any DUP council was very hard to get it over the line. As you've seen, Causeway Coast and Glen and other ABC was out in strike for longer. We went out for 1 week, we went out for 2 weeks, I came to go out for 4 weeks. We got engaged with our local councillors, sat down the chief executive and the management team, and we went down. What was realistic? Get 2 increments. No, we took 1 for this year and 1 for next year. And that was realistic, because at the day we heard what they say. We're not putting the rates up. And again, I do appreciate that the elected members that sit in this room, their parties, had told us straight they weren't putting the rates up. But they could find the money for this year, and next year we have to look for the other increment. We achieved that. We got a one-off payment of £500, a hardship payment. We could have got a lot more, and the difficulty we had was the other union was upset at ourselves. I was going to go up to PO2, they want to go up to PO6. If we had even up to a scale 6, the more money would have been divided out to the lowest paid. But as the saying is, as one of the people alluded to up there, as a teacher, if somebody is sitting on a PO6, they could be one and come on that house, their cost of living is the same as mine and everybody else's. So it's not a risk to the bottom. So we did come up together and we compromised. We succeeded. And then what happens is then, this is for Act 2. Unions should not be fighting unions. They should be supporting each other. The housing executive at the minute cannot move because one union is doing all the fighting, and they're the management sitting back and just sitting there going, why would we even get involved to take one union on to negotiate with them when the other union is not even asked them for this. The end of the day is, when I was out, it doesn't matter if you're an absolute unite, everybody got the pay rise. One increment this year, one next year, and a hardship payment. Solidarity only works if we all work together. Thank you.
Brendan's asked me just to come back briefly on one or two of those points. The first one, I think the premise of your question is you may be expecting me to say he wouldn't fit in. I think Larkin and Connolly fit in very well. I think they'd have a couple of observations. I think they'd be saying trade union movement in Northern Ireland is fighting back. Most of our members, most of our 24 unions have balloted for strike action and are going to engage in strike action. And I think they'd be saying it's really important that the Federation supports them all. So I wish they were around, they're not, but I think they'd fit in very well. And of course they'd add to it, wouldn't they? Yeah, but I think they'd fit in very well. The premise of the question was that they wouldn't. But I think the action that we're seeing over the next number of weeks and months is unprecedented in Northern Ireland. And we're all on the one side here, the union officials, the activists, the shop stewards, everybody. So I think they'd fit in well. Sean's point on Seagate is fundamental. There are institutional impediments, north and south, and in Britain, for access to workers when we're trying to organise, and they need to be removed. You know, we're an all-Ireland federation. Up here, you have legislation that's fairly poor. Now, McNally will tell you he's used it quite a lot on behalf of CICTU on trade union recognition. Quite frankly, it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. There's legislation in the States on trade union recognition, and you see where density's going. Not everybody in this room, well, I lament the fact that Northern Ireland and Britain is out of the European Union. Maybe not everybody in the room does, although this city voted heavily to remain. There's a European Union directive, and a lot of people are saying, nothing too radical comes from Europe. There's a European Union directive called the Adequate Minimum Wages Directive, championed by a former Minister for Labour in Luxembourg, a socialist. It's the most radical piece of legislation to come out of Europe in the last 20 years. We support it. And what it's going to do in the Republic of Ireland and in the other 27 member states is to plan to get collective bargaining coverage up to 80%. And there's a line in the directive that talks about access to the workplace. Now, that's a positive thing. We're going to work with that. We're going to get that transposed next year in the Republic. And we're arguing that the Minister for Economy in Northern Ireland, he or she, should take the best elements of it and transpose it here in an employment bill. That's a positive thing. And it's tragic that you don't get the direct effect of that directive because you're not in the EU. But that issue is fundamental, and it can only be solved. Digital access as well as physical access, by the way, that's crucial. The point that Cormac made in the Spurns, OMA Trades Council actually passed a motion at our conference. We will engage with the Trades Council and help you in whatever practical way we can, Cormac, because if it's in the Spurns today, it's elsewhere tomorrow. And that was, from memory, that motion was passed unanimously and got full support. On Paddy's point, I don't think anyone would say it better, Paddy. You're 100% right. We are better when we work together. But I'll say this, and it's important people know this. The Congress doesn't have a whip, you know. I don't have a big stick if unions are arguing. We can cajole, we can encourage, we can try and bring compromise. But each union, quite rightly, is sovereign. And you are spot on. In Derry and Strabane, you made progress because you came together, the outdoor staff, the indoor staff, two unions, maybe two different cultures, but you worked together, you hammered out your problems and your issues in private, and you went out in the picket line as long as others. Unfortunately, in other areas where there wasn't that dynamic locally where we could bring people together, it took a lot longer, and there's a lesson in that. And the lesson is we have to work together. We might have different cultures, different perspectives. Jerry talks about the INTO and the middle class teachers, but at the end of the day, if we work together and hammer out our concerns and our compromises, we're much stronger facing the employer. But the Irish Congress of Trade Unions does not have a magic lamp on that. And we have tried through a range, there's about 5 unions involved in the district councils, and we brought people together, and where we made progress was where we had people like you and others on the ground who were prepared to work together. That's where it worked. In others, it was a bit slow learners and it took a bit longer. But you are so right. Jerry's given the example. 5 teaching unions from different perspectives, from different backgrounds, different cultures, coming together as one. Still have their traditions, but coming together and saying we're pooling our resources in this campaign and we're going to do better. I have no doubt teachers are going to win, just as you and your colleagues have won. So this is about all of us coming together. Are we going to make mistakes in all of this? Yes. Are some of our demands going to be seen by some as modest? Yeah. But it's about making progress, you know, and it's about getting there over a period of time. But we're only going to do that if we're all together. But Sean's point about Seagate, you should, and it's important that the trade union movement in the branches focuses on that. Look at that directive. Let's make sure that we lobby a new economy minister to transpose it in an employment bill. It's crucial. Workers in the South are going to get the benefit. As an all-Ireland federation, we do not want workers in Northern Ireland to be left behind on that issue. It's crucial. I'll leave it at that.
What about trade sentences? Also on the question of recognition and access for trade unions to places of work, you know, us getting into organised workers. And this is another argument this is an argument actually for the restoration of devolution as well. The matter of industrial relations and industrial relations law is a devolved matter in this jurisdiction. Okay, so that gives us a couple of advantages which people on the Big Island don't have, and you know, we should be in a position to exploit that. So Section 10 of the New Decade New Approach is all about workers' rights. There's nobody in this room could have written that section in any more favourable terms for the trade union movement. We need devolution restored so that we can exploit that and exploit the opportunity to get in and organise the workplaces that represents. So that's part of the broader Workers Demand Better campaign, you know, the restoration of devolution. Let's not lose sight of that too, folks. We need that sort of, okay.
Thanks. And then I'll come to all the hands that are up here. 1 minute.
Yeah, it was just quickly on I know what Sean was saying there about trade union recognition within the manufacturing industry and Seagate. It's slightly different, but I mean, my view would be that if you're getting public money, if you're a nursing home owner, or you get money from the Department for Communities or any public money, you only get that public money if you guarantee trade union recognition and trade unions are allowed to come in and bargain on behalf of your workers. That's what needs to happen through this campaign, proper legislation. And in terms of what Cormac's saying there from Save Our Square, and I want to thank Cormac for coming down. I would like to suggest that a delegation from NIC ICTU, including the Trades Council Consultative Committee, actually goes up to yourself, Cormac, on invitation from you, and you show us around exactly what's going on, and we obviously publicise that and show solidarity with you, just as Unison Regional Committee did at a regional council 2 years ago when we passed a motion in support of your campaign. So I think that will be useful, and I think it's something we should work towards.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Sinead McLaughlin, MLA for Ford to the SDLP. And thanks to all the visitors that are coming here to speak tonight. I suppose I'm speaking from a city that has been in a cost of living crisis for many, many years. And when you're already in poverty, another tsunami that comes across actually floors you. You've no resources left to fight it. So our workers have been under pressure for a long, long time. But Dr. Lisa, in relation to what you outlined in your and the figures that you portrayed tonight, we have another additional problem. When a cost of living crisis comes along, women are affected more dramatically than anyone else in the households and that. So I'd like to hear from the heads of the unions just exactly, you know, how can we promote and help support our women who are living in this cost of living crisis and trying to budget in homes, and they're the most deprived of their part-time jobs, and it's stark there. There's thousands of pounds of a difference between men and women in our society and our workers. And I'm speaking from a politician, and I know that, and we have been fighting within the Economy Committee as well, and within Economy regarding that the commitment you dig it and you approach, because it has been actually just shoved in the background and nobody wants to take it out of the box.
There you go. Now, McNally, Centre of Trade Union. I think we should also recognise the successes we're having, you know, in organised workplaces, whether that be in private sector or public sector. You know, CICTU, Unite, GMB have been delivering 11, 12, 13, 14% pay increases. Recently, similar to the comrade in the corner there, the council in Newry Morning Down, we've delivered pay increments and increases there worth a value between 11 and 14% of workers. But the problem is there's vast swathes of workers that are not organised or don't have access, and part of this campaign is about addressing that. I am tired of, and Owen alluded to it, of going into courts seeking trade union recognition and having to jump through hoops to try and get it. What we really need, and we have the ability here because of the devolved establishment, is that they can legislate in terms of that employment law. We've been demanding it for how long? We need it now in this cost of living crisis. And in terms of what Sean had said there regarding the excuses we are going to experience over the next period over wages, there's not enough. There's no money there in the coffers. We already know, UNITE carried out a study that inflation is being driven by profits, by excess profits or pricing, by monopolies and employers taking advantage. In the US, it's something like 57%. So the question also needs to be posed through this campaign. It's not just wages. Wages follow prices. It's profits that are driving this crisis. And we need to redistribute through this campaign, through our organisations, through our trade unions, through our community groups, through linking in with the likes of this colleague here and other campaign groups. And this is the start of it. For me, this cannot be a top-down movement. It can't be NIC ICTU or the trade union bureaucracy. We need town hall meetings like this. We need to get into the nuts and bolts of it in communities and start the resistance now. So, and it's great to see everybody here. Thank you, colleagues.
Chris Garrigan here from Oak Grove Integrated College. I'm a teacher and also a representative with the NIC ICTU. I want to thank Jerry sincerely for the IMTO for his excellent response. He's outlined how much we're struggling as well as teachers. That you know, we're the working poor as well. And our General Secretary had stated that over 12 years we've had a 20% pay cut in real terms, and we've had nothing and nothing and nothing, and we're banging doors all the time. 81% of our members had voted to strike, and 98% of our members had voted to or balloted to action, short of strike action, which we're actually implemented with the NTO and the rest of our sister trade unions. I'd like to say that a good deal for teachers is an excellent deal for children. Our children are the people who are affected the most whenever we are not being invested in. It's not just that. Our workload has been increased time and time and time and time again. I'm only contracted to work until 3:10. I'm still got more work to do. I'm going to go home. I left work at 6 o'clock. It's over the weekends. It's during my holidays. It's everything. And it's taking up all the time that we have. There's more administration. There's new initiatives. There's a change in the needs of the child constantly, which we need to make sure that we bend our backs over for, because they need us. And it's also the legislative changes and keeping children safe and the safeguarding changes that we need to make sure that we have at all times. We have to make sure that we're updated. We have to make sure that we're checking that the children are safe and they've got safe surroundings. They can't do that with no investment. Can't do that with no resources. They don't put any money into the schools anymore. The schools are getting cut and cut and cut. Staffing shortages constantly. We had threatened, what was it, nine teachers? 7 teachers, 6 teachers were going to be made redundant, along with lots of other teaching assistants and support staff. You can't run a school with less people and still have the same amount of children in there. You can't run a school and provide the same quality of education for the children. You can't do that at all. So less funding for the teacher means that there's less funding for teacher-pupil ratio. Less funding for the school means there's less funding for resources. My department's shocking when it comes to me to try and deliver the same courses and not have the same resources as other people and other institutions. I still have to make sure that I get the same results, which I do all the time, but it nearly kills me to do it. There's less funding for meaningful educational experiences, especially as a head of year as well. I'm constantly looking for free things all the time to make sure that the children have educational research out, or there's educational outreach, that there's people that are coming in to make sure that they support our children. In a school of my size, only 4 children are ever considered for an educational psychologist. That is really, really bad. And these children are losing out massively. So that's what I'm saying, is that a massive change and a massive cut to funding for teachers and a massive cut to funding for schools means that this 12 years of 20% pay rise or pay decrease, what about the children's education? What about their decrease? What about their education? They come first, more than me. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Lisa and Patricia to come in briefly on Sinead's question. Not just we think that only women should answer questions about women, but just that they were particularly
Yeah, so the point on female earnings being particularly low. So when we look over the past 20 years, what we're seeing is male full-time earnings have been growing the slowest. But whenever you try to put that in context in the fuller picture in terms of what's going on, all that's really been happening to the rest of the workers is they've been catching up with the standard workers, so that standard traditional working relationship, the male and full-time employment, the male working the 40-hour working week. So it's not that you've seen a racing ahead of part-time workers or female workers. It's almost like a catch-up, and really what it's doing is as a pulling down. So because male earnings haven't been going anywhere, and female earnings have just been catching that, it's a harmonising down rather than this broad scale leveling up, and it's really worrying in that conversation. But just whenever we're talking about the gender pay gap, and I think it's important to make the point, because oftentimes when we hear about the gender pay gap in Northern Ireland, it's talked about as though there's a negative gender pay gap, and that means that females actually earn more per hour than males. That is true on an hourly basis, but because we know that females work less in the week than males, when we look at it over a weekly basis or an annual basis or a lifetime basis, there's a huge gender pay gap in terms of the proportion of earnings that females obtain from working as a result of the gender pay gap. And much of the reasons behind that is due to the childcare responsibilities. So there's 2 key things there and 2 key kind of policy asks that I see that sit behind that. The first relates to the social wage and provision of affordable and accessible childcare. Just as an example, I live in Donegal and I was coming to an event in Derry here a couple of weeks ago, and because access to childcare is so limited, and I've got 2 young children, the meeting was starting at 10 o'clock in the morning, but my access to my childcare only opens at 8:30. I was coming to Derry, which was one of the closest meetings that I have. Generally now that I live in Donegal and I'm still based near Belfast office, I still was late getting to the thing because my access to my childcare service just wasn't available. That's leaving aside things to do with the affordability of it. And the second relates to this notion that when we're looking to increase the earnings of females, or to close the gender pay gap, that the goal should be to make all female workers look like the single adult male worker, because it doesn't work for most people. It might work for a certain portion of our workers, but for most workers, males and females alike, mothers and fathers alike, this notion that we can all work all of the time and all do all of these family things and all do all of these other things doesn't work. And I think unless we talk really about work-life balance and what that actually means, that we're always going to have that struggle, and we're always going to have females bearing the brunt because they're the ones who've been doing it until now. Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. You going to say something, Patricia? No?
Right. I'm busy listening. Yes, I do want to say a number of things. First of all, the Feminist Recovery Plan is one of the most comprehensive programs and set of recommendations that I have seen in many's a year, and I don't think any of us could go past that in terms of the analysis of the impact that basically life has had on women in this society, not just the pandemic, because it looks at every facet at home, at work, in society in general. We are part of that as the Congress. We're part of the Women's Policy Group that put that together. Affiliates are part of that. Affiliated unions are part of that as well. We're involved. I'm a union which is 83% women members. Of that, a very significant portion of our membership are part-time workers. If you want to look for the most disadvantaged of our workers, you will find them working in delivering public services, but delivering them inside private sector employers, or what's called community sector, what's called voluntary sector, but they're essentially, private or third sector employers, many of whom simply will not recognise rights. But in addition to that, you see, you consider this strike ballot that we have out at the minute. One of the things we've got to think about is that a significant number of our members who are women, who are part-time workers, are most likely going to vote yes for strike action. But increasingly, that's one of the jobs they've got. And not just 2 jobs, but 3 jobs. We're doing a lot of work at the minute to find out exactly what that looks like. I mean, I think everybody has known, the mommy who did 3 jobs to get the kids through school, but now it's just to survive. So we've got to take those kind of considerations, real life considerations, and internalize those and figure out how are you able to get your member involved in industrial action when they've also got an obligation to maybe 2 other employers as well. There are ways and means of doing that, but those are the things we've got to be sensitive to. And I do want to say something else, and you sort of triggered it when you were talking about the children, and I feel exactly the same way about the patients out there who are waiting, and their families, and all of those who are waiting for some kind of a care package. So they and the children and the parents, they must become a really important part of this campaign, and they must be a focus of ours, because in the first 20 years of Unison, in all the various industrial action we had, most of it, if not all of it, was not about pay. It was actually about what was happening to services and what was happening to people. And I think we've got to think a lot more about how we do that, because I think if we're going to do things like save the NHS from the dire state that it's in at the minute, then it's got to be with the public, with patients. And there isn't anybody speaking out for the patients. Not really. How do they get a voice? How do you even know where you are in a queue? And who determines where you are on that queue? And how do you get up or down that queue? And we've asked this question many times of the system, and we can't get an answer. So I think we've got to start digging deep and finding out, who's really controlling what in this society at the minute. But a voice for people who could be doing with some of the resources we have to be able to make their voices heard. Thanks, Patricia.
Up. I'm going to take one more round, and then I'm going to come back to get an input from everybody on the panel, because we want to get out of here by 9 o'clock. Right, I'm going to what's the word? I'm going to let women speak more, because there's been fewer of them. So I'll start with yourself, and then I'll come to the trade unionists. I see you. Don't worry.
Brenda, thank you, and thank all of our speakers here tonight. My name is Brenda Stevenson. I'm the Regional Officer with Unite the Union based in the Carlisle Road office here in Derry. I'm delighted to hear the debate come on tonight because we've been hearing it in the workplaces from my came into post 18 months ago across the board regionally. Listen to what Paddy said there about Derry and Strabane. I have ABC on my allocation, so I know how hard our fight was won up there, and it took the three unions together to toe the line and keep management on on subject with us, and we actually got our 2 pay increments in the 1 year, which will have a knock-on effect next year in any national pay award that comes forward. I suppose for me, I worked in the NHS before I came tonight, and one of the greatest models of work and practice among the unions was within our own Western Trust here, where I worked with my colleagues in Unison and NIPSA and the RCN and all the other unions that were there, and we were always, it was always a model of practice. We didn't always agree with one another, but we always got the job done and made sure that we fought for the needs and rights of our communities and our staff within the Western Trust. Listening to what Barry said there too, in terms of some of the big wins that we've had, we have been having big wins, but we're industrial actions coming out of our eyes at the minute. I was doing a pay claim yesterday, got the results of it. No, we're rejecting the pay claim. We're not taking 5.3%. It's not going to help us in the run up to Christmas. Let's go to the gates. You know, our numbers in the unions are rising and rising and rising. People are starting to see the value of the union. And Sean, you're right in terms of the joint mandate that we're both doing, you know, along with yourselves and with United Seagate. There, it would give me no greater pleasure to see Seagate unionised. So we wouldn't, as the niece of somebody who brought Seagate to Derry. So that's all I've got to say. I don't want to rehearse whatever everybody else said tonight as well.
My name's Padraig Gallagher, one of the Sinn Féin MLAs for Derry. Look, I just want to touch firstly on what Jerry and Chris have said. As a former teacher, it definitely strikes me as something that I've been standing constantly with teachers, been in touch with teachers on a number of issues, but I think we've touched on pay, touched on conditions across the board, but what we haven't heard as much of is that people are actively leaving the workforce as well, that we're losing people each and every day, each and every week, each and every month across sectors, because the pay and the conditions simply aren't good enough.
Yeah.
There are a number of other protests and other industrial actions which are going on at the minute. We'll continue to stand with each and every one of those sectors, to continue to stand with each and every one of those workers, and we won't apologise to anyone for doing so. So Patricia challenged us earlier to tell us what our role is, what each and every one of us is going to do. We'll continue to have those conversations. Since I came into the role over a year ago, I've been in over 30 primary schools across this area to meet with classroom assistants, to meet with teachers, to hear that. We've been right across the board meeting with workers each and every day. We'll continue to do that, but we'll also bring that fight to Stormont. We'll also continue to bring forward bills that are going to improve the lives of workers, that are going to continue to make lives better. And just on Niall's point as well, we have been able to bring forward a bill which means that any public sector worker or public sector contract now has to employ living wage workers, so that is a bare minimum. Can we go further than that? Of course we can. But one of the gentlemen in the front row earlier touched on a key point, and he asked what Jim Larkin and what James Conley would think of today. And I think it's not about a theory of what they would do, it's looking at what they did. And what they did was to challenge not just the symptoms of the problem, but the root of the problem. And what we can do in Stormont is to tackle some of the symptoms that we see each and every day. We can tackle a certain level of the inequality, but as Patricia touched on, we can't tackle everything as much as we want to. We stand in Stormont in isolation from a lot of the benches, and I'm glad to see you, the people before profit, that the SDLP are here today, because that unity is important. It's important that socialists right across progressive parties stand together. I'm really happy to see the breadth of political opinion, to see the breadth of opinion here tonight. We need to see that continue. But what we also need to do is to tackle the root of that, and the root of that is in Westminster. The root of that is the fact that no matter who is in number 10, that we don't have control of our own fiscal destiny, that we don't have control of our own political circumstance, and until that's dealt with, we can never tackle the root problems here today. We have an opportunity within the next decade, within the next generation, to really tackle that, to build our own country, to build a socialist country, and to tackle these issues head on. So I want to see each and every person here tonight continue with us in that conversation. But what do we do coming out of this room tonight? It's to continue to stand together as political parties. And as I say, Sinead and Sean, I'm really glad to see you here. Want to have those meetings and continue to stand with you, but also to stand as activists, because this isn't just about talking, it's about going out in the streets, it's about involving ourselves in action. So I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations, to meeting with each and every one of you, and to standing in Guildhall Square, to standing in Belfast, to standing in London, and to standing up to the companies that are the root cause of these problems.
We want to see all the politicians standing on the picket lines as well, not just the social ones. Okay, so I've been on picket lines so much in UCU for the last like 5 years that I know what every single politician is doing. I've got 6 people with their hands up. If I take you all, then you can only get 2 minutes each, okay? So who I have, just to let you know, I have Rory, Harry, Maeve, Alan, Liam, and I saw Aidan putting his hand up. Do you really? Okay. Right. So just to let you know that you're all there, like, so you don't keep on putting your hands up. So Rory, you've been waiting a while.
Thank you. Rory was there, and Derry Trades Council. I think that Sean alluded to it there, the people always asking where does the money come from, and I think that's one of the myths that we need to start busting, because money only comes from one place, and that's the Bank of England. CJs don't create money, they create profit. It has to be redistributed. The Bank of England create money, politicians choose how it's spent, so they have to make their choice. They're either with us or with us, so it has to be redistribution of profits. The second point then is that we spoke a lot about trade union solidarity and about the campaign and how we're aiming towards a rally in Belfast now. But I think one of the things that we need to take into account as well is that at the end of this, all the unions are going to be balloted. We need to be organising all the unions together and we're going for a general strike and take everybody out at the one time.
Liam wants a quick question.
Sorry, Liam Gallagher, United. Look, everything that's been said has been laudable. We're speaking to the converted because we're speaking to ourselves. The difficulty is union intensity. I'm glad to hear that the current situation is driving people under the union. Let's hope that continues. But the reality about Seagate, for example, I'm delighted that Sean is back with this, is that Seagate, as an example, there are 1,400 workers employed in that at the moment. Union density is about 20%. The situation in Seagate would change tomorrow, and people would join the unions. Now we've got to convince those people that's their interest to join the union. That's the problem. I would also like to know from Owen what their ICTU's media strategy will be to back up what's happening in these town houses. I think people have alluded, we've seen these campaigns before, and we've seen them peter out. How do we keep the momentum going? How do we keep the unity going? Is there a strategy for dealing with the media?
I have Harry Hutchison, the Ulster Trades Council and the Labour Party in Northern Ireland. When you look at what's been done to deal with this crisis, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England are all putting up interest rates to deal with this scourge of inflation. They are quite prepared to bust the economy in order to get inflation down. The consequences is going to be enormous now over the next months, perhaps the next 2 years before this can be rescued. People are being made to pay. Small businesses, God knows how many, are going to go to the wall in the next number of months, years. This is out of the hands of the government. It is the banks, the major central banks, that are taking this initiative. 2 years ago, the price of a barrel of oil was about $40. They're trying to bring this war in Ukraine. It was OPEC that came together and cut production and pumped it right up to over $100. That is called the fuel crisis, that is predominantly behind inflation. 2 weeks ago, OPEC did exactly the same thing again and pumped it up, particularly Saudi Arabia. Not even an intervention from Biden. Stop it. Out with the hands of governments. If you look at the strikes going on at the moment, in the RM strike, against Royal Mail, it's out of the hands of the government. British Telecom, the transport sector, all. The government has no influence whatsoever. It's very influence. I think they're back at the employer secretly, but it's all out of the hands of the government. The health service will fix the health service. Why would they want to fix the health service when they've spent 20 years to getting it to this point where they want it to be? 20 years outsourcing agency workers instead of them. My point is, folks, is this campaign, which is masses of trade, as you well know, on the streets. A few weeks ago, the people on the streets in 50 cities throughout Britain, on the streets, and they're looking for someone to give the lead. We have got to go above the heads of the governments. Even Richie Sunak more or less said that in an article in the Times a few weeks ago, saying governments are not in a position to deal with the crisis. At least he recognized something. We've got to go over the heads of the governments, and we've got to go where the wealth is. And I'm not talking about a windfall tax and sharing of profits. We need to nationalise and put nationalisation right in the front of our campaign. Here we
I'm Mabel O'Neill. I'm a people before profit counsellor, but also a hospital worker and CSP rep. I just want to say, like in my lifetime, I haven't seen this energy in the trade union movement. Other people might be able to tell stories of previous times where there has been this energy.
Oh, there has been. There has been.
I feel very
the old folk like us know there has been.
I feel very encouraged, and I think there's a real hunger and appetite from workers to fight back right now. You know, not just here, but you know, all across these islands and across the world. And like, you know, in Galvin, I see like many trade union colleagues here this evening, and like we're working very, very well together across unions, because I think on the ground, union activists and reps can work very, very well together. We're organising regular demonstrations to build up for strike action and strike ballot. And I think, as Patricia says, you know, our fight for the NHS is not just about pay, it's not just about terms and conditions, it really is about the future of a national health service, and it impacts every single person. And you know, I suppose I really fear for the coming winter, and I think, you know, it is right that we are fighting back in the winter, because this is when times are going to be worse for workers, but also for patients. And it does feel powerless within that system, but I think the one thing that gives you power is standing with other people and fighting back, and that is the thing. That is what gives you hope, and that's what gives you energy through these very, very hard times, because I think people feel powerless in the face of the cost of living crisis, never mind on waiting lists and that endless system. And I think during COVID, there felt like there was a real opportunity for change where we recognise the value of care. And I think we need to like remember those values in our fight back whenever we are, like, you know, it's easy to fight back and say we want more pay, but we also want to shape like a new world and better, you know, a better systems. And I think, like on Cormac's point, you know, in terms of the Dalradian gold mining company, like I think the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis are definitely interlinked, because they're both being fueled and driven by corporate greed and profiteering, and the destruction and the extraction of workers and nature for profit. And I think, you know, capitalism is at the root of this problem, but you know, whether it's the end of the week with our paycheck or the end of the world with the climate crisis, the fight is the same, and the change has to come from below and from people fighting back. Thank
you. 3 years ago, I stood in the gave our colleagues for the community. We got that. But it was a fierce enough. It was a fierce enough struggle. The thing that also was on board with that was safe staffing. 3 years on, being got it.
working with colleagues who are tired, who are exhausted, delivering a service that has been underinvested, has been privatised. You know, where are we going with this? This is a public service that is meant to be what we call from the cradle to the grave. And the way this is going is practically going to the grave. Them politicians who sat with us on the picket lines promised us, and we're on there. And as Patricia hinted, we may have given a wee push back in the government. We're back in the same boat again. You know, where is our politicians? Our colleagues within England and Wales have got their percentage rise. Our colleagues in Scotland have got that. Where's our politicians who sign off ours? They're not going to get it. It could be next year before we even see any of that. And when we do see that, tax, national insurance, and everything else will be taken out of it, and there'll be nothing left of a so-called pay rise, way, way below inflation. Our colleagues are leaving in droves. They're going to agencies. We're spending millions on agencies. I understand when nurses leave and go to get that. And the majority are women who have other caring things to do. They're mothers who cares for their parents and all the rest of it. They're struggling with bills. They're leaving to get money that we, as our payment, as at the moment, is absolutely poor. We understand where they're going, but as they move out and as the money has been spent on agencies, why don't we invest in the NHS? This is our NHS. This is a public service. It's a jewel, and it's been undermined by privatisation and lack of investments. We've had report after report about how they're going to change and move things. We have yet to see any of that, and this is where we are. I'm not going to be standing on the picket line demanding what I call a better pay and demanding NHS. Let's save this NHS. Let's support this NHS. Let's get the staff invested. I don't want to be standing with my colleagues after a 12-hour shifts and they are struggling what I call deliver a service that there's no people giving us support. We are looking at people who are totally exhausted. They're leaving, thinking that they haven't delivered what they're supposed to deliver. They know that when they go on strike, they will do their best to look after people. They are now, you can hear it sort of like all the witness that you're putting people at risk. 3 years ago, we were putting people at risk. It wasn't us. It was the politicians. It was the lack of investment. You know, let's do something. But if we keep going the way we are going, the jewel in the crown of the NHS will end up being in the grave if we don't get the public support and the support of all the trade unions. And as Mayo said, we have been standing together. We may have differences, but we're all standing for one thing. We are there for the patients. We're there for the public. Please support our strike.
Victory, got me one. So Eamon, and then I'll come back to the panel.
Just two, and genuinely will be quite brief points, I think. One of them is that the whole question sort of the right of trade unionists to be represented includes the right to be in a trade union and the right to have unfettered access to workers in order to recruit them into trade unions. Now, the law which covers that in Northern Ireland, industrial relations law, is devolved. It's not Westminster's fault. Mind you, ultimately it might be their fault. There could be Brussels' fault. There could be Washington's fault. But in Northern Ireland, the laws governing the right of trade union representatives to recruit workers is a Northern Ireland thing. It's a Stormont thing. And there's absolutely no point, it seems to me, you need to outline your passionate commitment to the rights of workers if you don't take what action you can take within the context of Northern Ireland. And I would hope that in the coming weeks and months, when and if we have a restoration of Stormont, that we're going to have a unanimous view from people that we want to give trade union representatives that right. vote for the Trade Union Freedom Bill. That's what I say to you. So it's better than everywhere else. There's a lot of nervousness around there, rightly so. You know, there's things falling apart, you know, here and in London and everywhere, and so forth. We look at where can we find a better hope. Now, a lot of people look to say we want to end sectarianism, and they look and they're entitled to do this, and it's a decent thing to do. They try to look to moderate people in the middle, to lure people in from the extremes. They want well-spoken middle-class people. No harm to them. Some of them are my friends. In the middle, they stop being part of this sort of sectarian argy-bargy. But in practical terms, if you look back over our history and ask yourself a simple question, in what circumstances have large numbers of Catholic and Protestant working class people, in what circumstances have they come together to link arms in pursuit of a political ideal? It is always in the context of the trade union movement, always. 1907, Larkin's been mentioned, 1911, immediately after the great wave of working class militancy and the aftermath of the First World War, 1919, general engineering strike. I could go on right up 1932, Curraw and Rees and Belfast, and right up to the present day, sort of the health service over and over again. I mean, I've had the honour of speaking to rallies of health service workers, 25,000 strong in Belfast. That's not, and they stand on a platform and look at 25,000 people. They're looking to defend the health service. You can look all around, but there's no way of telling what community people come from. They're there for a single purpose. And at the same time, every time some people fight against poverty or fight for trade union rights, they are doing it in advancing a dimension of themselves, which has got nothing whatever to do with the community that you came from. And we want to get hope for a different Northern Ireland, a cleaner and non-sectarian Northern Ireland. Our history tells us, including our recent history, that's how to go about it. Don't look to this or that sort of moderate leader. Look to the trade union movement and look to methods which can be used, I say this in relation to Stormont, which are going to clear the way of obstacles. No longer should people be standing outside a factory trying to hand out leaflets about joining a trade union and be told that they call the police on you. That has happened to me. I suspect it's happening at the police officer. I remember standing with Aileen Webster, so many of you will know that she's here today, and be told, but call the police on you. And you do it because you're obstructing the passage. We didn't go, of course. You know, but deal with that. Deal with that. Give us access to people who want to be. It's true we need more people in unions. But it follows from that is we want to make it easier for people to join unions and easier for trade union representatives actually to get a sort of direct access to workers that we want to recruit. If we did those things, it wouldn't solve all our problems. Not at all. But I'll tell you what, we won't solve all our problems without those things. So let's get to it.
No, I had my hand up earlier, and it was before there was a few Alton Galvin speakers, because I'm a champagne counsellor, I'm also a worker, one of our health workers, and I wanted to speak as a health worker because I've worked in the health service for almost 20 years, and over that 20 years I've seen the decline of the service that's being delivered. It's been alluded to around creeping privatisation. It's not even creeping anymore. It's blatant privatisation. So we're seeing that. We're seeing the impacts of a Tory austerity campaign that's having right across all our public services. And one of the things, because a lot of people that I work with who play a part in the delivery of key essential services, key public services, are earning less than what teachers were earning in 2005. So that shows you the scale of the challenge that people now delivering services, essential services within our city and district are facing during this cost of living crisis. I know people who I work with who go into work to keep warm. That's where we're at. That's the scale of the pressure, and these are people who we've continuously stepped forward and said we value the work that they do, but that value isn't reflected on their pay or on the staffing numbers, which has been alluded to earlier. But one of the key demands that it sort of hasn't been touched on. There's Padraig alluded to that there is opportunities. There's opportunities that are on the horizon. Everybody gathered in this room supports the Workers Demand Better campaign and the demands that are included within that. I suppose one key question the Congress of Trade Unions is that whenever the conversation advances around constitutional change on this island, will the Congress of Trade Unions, because the Congress of Trade Unions are an integral part of society, and when we're looking forward to the future of this island, the demands of the Workers Demand Better campaign need to be front and centre to how we shape this island going forward, because we can campaign towards the Tories, accept the crumbs off the table, which really you've alluded to earlier. It's not getting us anywhere. If we're going to end corporate greed, if we're going to nationalise public services, we've got an opportunity, and it's within our grasps. And I suppose the voice of the trade unions needs to be heard loud and clear in all the conversations around constitutional change within this island. Thank you.
I'm really not going to take another round, sorry, because otherwise, it's 9 o'clock now. But there's a lot of talk about unity here today, and I think that's absolutely brilliant and important. And it's important that it's not just unity between workers, people who are in work, but also people who are out of work. In this city, there's a lot of people who are dependent on benefits. And on November the 26th, Derry Trades Union Council has called a march, which has been supported by a number of the groups that are involved in various campaigns around the cost of living crisis. And it will be gathering in Guildhall Square at 1:30. You'll be glad to hear it's not one of them big long marches that we often have in Derry. It'll just be around the city centre. But we'd really encourage all of you to come. There's bundles of these leaflets available at the back there as you go out. Take them away, give them out in your workplace, give them out in your community. It's already up on our Facebook page, is it? On our social media. If it's not, it will be in the next couple of days. We have the demands of the Workers Demand Better campaign, but we've added to that other demands which are actually taken from the Trade Union Congress in Britain around rate rises in benefits. So the Trade Union Congress in Britain has said that we need to see benefits being about 80% of the living wage. Now, if you think about it, that would be about £260 a week for people who at present get £77 a week. So it is a good demand, and we've added that because we want to keep to the trade union. We have trade union demands, but have ones that fit particularly for this city where so many people are dependent, including people, of course, who are in work. Are dependent on benefits. We know that about 30% of the population here at the moment, and 30% of universal credit claimants are in work, and we expect that to grow, given the wage rates here, to probably 50 or 60% if it should be low. So all of you, hope to see you on the 26th of November. That's 2 weeks on Saturday. Yeah, 2 weeks on Saturday. And if you're not there, we know who you all are and where you live. So now I'm going to ask everybody on the panel to come back as briefly as they can to sort of sum up what they took from the meeting today, and we'll finish with Owen. We'll finish with you. So Patricia, do you want to?
Okay, well, seeing as we're doing plugs, those of you who are in the vicinity of Belfast, you know, the capital city, on Saturday, it's the climate demonstration, and it's supported by the Irish Congress of Trade Unions, and we're trying to get as many people out in support of that. It's the one, matches what's going on at over the COP, right? I think that Liam made the point that we are talking to each other, and in a way we're talking to ourselves, but that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing, because we probably don't talk to each other and to ourselves enough. But if you just think about the number of people in the room tonight, and just the number of families that adds up to, and the number of work colleagues and the number of friends in the local community, then we can get this message through very, very quickly. And people, it's the imperative of every socialist to struggle how they can. And, not everybody can do the same thing, but I think that everybody can do a little in terms of a contribution towards making our voices heard. I suppose I would go back and just remember the days when I first started in the movement, and back then, if they were taking the crossing patrol away, the mums with the kids in the prams just blocked the road. And when they were cutting the jobs in our hospital like the Royal, the workers come out and block the motorway. Now, I'm not advocating people
Why not?
right and live at risk, but I was very impressed years ago when I saw the AFL-CIO's direct action handbook.
Yeah.
And I think it is time for us to think a wee bit more about direct action that everybody used to be very good at, and we've got like a wee bit too polite. And I'm not advocating that any of my members put themselves or their lives or limbs in jeopardy, but at the same time, I think we need to start thinking a bit smarter about how we do disrupt. It's not just about strike action.
Gerda, can I make a point that day at the rally? Like a lot of us here are trade unionists. I'm a part of Jerry's gang, I am too. But I think that day we should welcome every worker, and it's not just people in trade unions that day. And because if you're not part of a trade union, come along. We will assign you can join that day, because too many. If I drive up and down the Glen Shane, I see construction workers afraid to ask for a wage rise. I can see so many people absolutely afraid. So that day needs to be open, and we need to welcome those who are non-trade unionists, because sometimes it's just us all, that's you. Look, people are afraid. Sometimes people stay away from me in conversation. Oh, that's that union woman again. Because we got that head. But I think welcome everybody that day.
And recruit them.
Workers who are not in trade unions, but also workers who aren't able to work for whatever reason, or workers who've retired. So that's really, really important. Patricia just reminded me that I was supposed to make a little announcement, because this Saturday there's also a climate event, an environmental event here in Derry. And it starts,
I knew you would be.
so it starts in an unusual way. It starts at 12 o'clock with a guided walk of Prehen Ancient Woods. Don't know if you know that, but it's actually well worth going around if you haven't done. And then at 1 o'clock, it gathers at Prehen Boathouse to march together to the train station for speakers, and then on to St. Colum's Park, to St. Colum's Park House, where there's like music and stuff like that. But of course, the Trades Council are more interested in this one. But we'll be at all. The Trades Council banner hopefully will be there on Saturday as well, because I'm looking at night, because I don't know. Anyway, Jerry.
So Siobhan started talking there, and she talked about, that trade union woman. I can understand them people's fear. I just want to say thanks again for the enthusiasm and the energy. It's always a pleasure to have it. And by the way, in case nobody else says it, all the best to Derry City on Saturday. Shameless populist at the final. But I'm also an autocrat. There's a lot of things which you've contributed here this evening, which I've made note of. Derry Trades Council are noting action points. I was noting action points too, and more than that, I was noting ideas and directions, possible directions of travel. But I know Owen was too, and I know Patricia was as well. Thank you for all of that. We'll take that away. This will be an evolving beast. We're inviting you to climb on the back of. Okay? And we want you on there with us. Okay? So thanks again.
I just want to come in very quickly on the point that this is higher than governments, or we need to go after corporations, whatever. I think it's a completely fair point, but do not let governments off the hook. Government policy can intervene in massive ways here. The evidence base that I showed you about earnings changes in Northern Ireland, they're worse here than what they are in the rest of the UK. They're worse here than what they are in the Republic of Ireland. That's due to a series of policy choices that have been made. those points that we talked about in relation to gender or childcare strategies, whatever, we don't have a devolved administration. So the gender equality strategy and the childcare strategies have just been sitting there getting updated every single time that the devolved administrations come back into place, but nothing ever being done. Government can intervene and government policies can affect action, can have positive action if they are done. So I get what I get your point, but there's fundamental things that policy levers that can be taken here which will have a positive effect.
Look, I think everything has been said. It has to be said, and I just want to thank everybody for coming and thank Owen and everybody else at the ICTU for agreeing to have the first town hall meeting here in Derry in association with the Trades Council. And even though our part in terms of town hall meetings will come to the end tonight, we'll still be involved. And just in terms of the lady there talking about the 26th, I mean, we are going to be reaching out, and there'll be a list of people who are endorsing the march and rally on the 26th, such as youth clubs and political parties and stuff. So we hope to have a huge list of people who are endorsing it, and they're going to come out today along with trade unions and cost of living campaign organisers and various other groups. And I think, I talked about earlier on about how we spend our public money, and Paddy was talking about the council and they couldn't find the money for their strike. And I think people are starting to look a bit more about how our money is spent. And if you look at how the council, I mean, there's £500,000 is spent on the Clipper Festival here every year, and you have to raise questions about that. I mean, it's money going to the golden circle that operates in this town. I mean, there's people in this town can't even afford to attend Clipper Festival. Like, you have a bunch of rich people coming in and poor people waving at them. What sort of message is that setting? It's not something, I mean, it's good to have events, but we need to be careful how we spend our money, and our money has to be available for workers.
Half price.
What was that?
Yeah. For half price because of COVID.
Yeah.
And you can see that year before that when they sponsored the boat on the Clipper, it was 2 million.
Yeah. So,
and if you go down there, you take your family down, you pay a tenner for a burger.
Absolutely. So, I mean, this is all the stuff that should be in this campaign, and talk about childcare. Childcare should be free, and this should be central to this campaign. And my colleague there on NIC ICTU was talking about the hardships that are within schools, and I think Unison have a great campaign going. Free school meals for all, and that needs to be central to this campaign as well. And we talked about women being disproportionately affected out of the cost of living, and I welcome Padraig's comments, and I see that he genuinely, he is genuine in his efforts for workers and working class people, and I thank you for that, Padraig, and all our political representatives that are here. But we also need to have enhanced maternity pay within all public contracts as well. Any woman who's going off, and for men too, for paternity, probably more actually. But because it's only 2 weeks for a man, obviously, in terms of maternity leave. But that needs to be something looked at too, Padraig, in terms of enhanced maternity pay for women. But as I say, thank you everybody for coming. There's great energy here, and let's take it outside these 4 walls. Thank you.
I'll just stand up so you can see me. I'll be very brief. It was an excellent meeting. If the other 14 are remotely as good as this, we'll be going away enthused. Really super. Thank you all so much. 3 very quick points to make. And I hope they're optimistic points, because we need to be optimistic. And Niall is right. We need to talk about our successes and our potential as well as the challenges. Let us not underestimate that if we get a progressive Minister for the Economy, how fundamental that might be. But if and when we get a progressive Minister for the Economy, we have to ensure that he or she delivers in the interest of workers across Northern Ireland. And we have to make sure that they prioritise that, and that they do the things that need to be done to make it easier for those who want to join unions to be in unions, and for that to be effective. We don't want conscripts, we want volunteers. Second point to make, and I think we have to, there was a study done in the Republic of Ireland that looked at the world of work and people's attitudes to trade unionism. 52% of 16 to 34-year-olds from right across the board, from all different stratas, of a representative sample of each working sector, 52% of those 16 to 34-year-olds who weren't in a union said they wanted to be in a union. So despite some of our own problems that maybe we create for ourselves, and some of the things that we don't do as well as we do, more than 1 in 2 young people, the next generation of workers in the Republic of Ireland, I imagine it's no different north of the border, feel that the trade union movement is a viable vehicle for change to deal with the issues that are important to them: housing, work, respect in the workplace, welfare, the environment, and all those other matters, and justice. And the last point I would make, and there was a lot of talk about trade union unity. There was some talk about the constitutional future of our island. Eamon is right. We are unique. There's nobody like the trade. There's no organisation like our movement on this island. Because of our diversity, because of our breadth. There are other all-island organisations on this island, but they're not like us. And that's not a negative comment about them, because they don't have the diversity that we have. And we are involved in that debate. With a paper that we produced recently, it's on our website. We met the Shannon Committee on the Future Constitutional Status of the Island of Ireland, and we will engage in that debate, because we can't leave it to people who have firm views either way, because our views are quite diverse. But in being involved in that debate, we have to put the primacy of the unity of our movement above anything, because our values do not stop at a man-made border, whatever that border looks like. They're international, they're universal, and they're the most important thing that binds us all together. So we're not going to do anything that upsets that, but we will engage in that debate in a positive way that brings all of our people with us to whatever solution that we come to. So I just think there are things that we can be really optimistic about. And thank you all so much for being here. You've been wonderful. Jerry's right, we have taken really significant notes. There are things that you have suggested that are going to add value to this campaign. We're going to run it for the next 6 months, and then we're going to take stock and we're going to review it, and we're going to review it with the trades councils and others, because we're all partners, we're all in this together. So thank you all so much, and let's keep the faith, and let's get behind all those unions that are going to be engaged in struggle over the next number of weeks and months, and let's make sure we win. No Pyrrhic defeats, only victories. There's too many Pyrrhic victories where we fought a great fight, but sure we lost. Too much history about that. Let's make new history and have wins. Yeah. And let's know what a win is. And let's be ready to do the deal with